The night the forest swallowed the king, the air was thick with a frightening silence. We all knew something was coming, but no one dared to speak it aloud. In our village, deep in the heart of Africa, King Omari ruled with an iron fist. He was cruel and selfish, always wanting more gold, more power. The villagers feared him, but none more than his own chiefs. They were his most trusted men, but even they trembled in his presence. One dry season, a stranger arrived in our village. He was a thin, old man, with eyes that seemed to look right through you. He claimed to be a storyteller and asked for a place to rest. The king, always curious about new stories, allowed him to stay. That night, the stranger told us a tale about a hidden cave filled with treasures beyond imagination. But he warned of a curse that would fall upon anyone who took the gold. The king, blinded by greed, ordered his chiefs to find the cave and bring him the treasure. The chiefs obeyed, though fear was plain on their faces. They left at dawn and did not return until the next full moon. When they came back, they carried bags heavy with gold and jewels. The king was overjoyed, but the chiefs looked haunted. From that day on, strange things began to happen. The chiefs started acting strangely. They spoke of whispers in the night, shadows that moved on their own, and eyes watching them from the dark. The king ignored their pleas for help, too busy counting his riches. One by one, the chiefs disappeared. The villagers found them in the forest, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways, eyes wide open in horror. The king tried to cover up their deaths, but the village was filled with whispers of the curse. Then, the king himself started to change. His once strong frame grew thin and weak. He spoke to shadows and screamed at nothing. His laughter, once booming, turned into a mad cackle. The villagers were too afraid to confront him, and soon, he too vanished. The villagers say the forest took him. They say you can still hear his cries on a quiet night, calling for his lost gold. The stranger was never seen again, but his story lives on. We all learned a lesson from this: greed leads only to darkness. I was just a child when it happened, but I remember it all too well. The fear in the eyes of the chiefs, the madness of the king, and the dark, whispering forest. Now, I live in the city, far from the village and its cursed memories. But at night, when the world is quiet, I can still hear the screams. My father was one of the chiefs. His name was Chief Amadi. He was a strong man, respected and loved by the villagers. I remember the day he left for the cave. He kissed my forehead and told me he would bring back riches that would change our lives forever. But when he returned, he was a different man. He wouldn't sleep in the house anymore. He said the walls whispered to him, that he saw shadows creeping closer. My mother cried every night, trying to comfort him, but nothing worked. One night, I woke to his screams. He was standing outside, staring at the forest with wide, terrified eyes. He kept saying, "They are coming for me," over and over. The next morning, he was gone. They found him deep in the forest, his body twisted, his face frozen in a look of pure horror. The village mourned, but the fear was stronger than the grief. No one spoke of the curse openly, but everyone knew. The king ordered us to continue our lives as usual, but how could we? The market was empty, the fields were untended. People stayed in their homes, whispering prayers to keep the curse away. The king grew more paranoid, accusing everyone of plotting against him. I would watch him from afar, seeing the madness take over. He started talking to himself, then to things that weren't there. He would laugh maniacally, then scream in terror. The palace was filled with his cries. The villagers avoided it like a plague. One night, I gathered the courage to follow him. I saw him leave the palace and walk into the forest. I trailed behind, keeping my distance. He stopped at a clearing, where the moonlight shone bright. He was talking to someone, but no one was there. Suddenly, he screamed and fell to the ground, clawing at his own skin as if something was attacking him. I watched in horror, frozen to the spot. His body twisted and contorted in unnatural ways. Then, with a final, blood-curdling scream, he went silent. I ran back to the village, my heart pounding in my chest. I told the elders what I had seen. They decided to bury the gold, hoping to appease the spirits. We took the treasure back to the cave, leaving it in the darkness where it belonged. Years have passed, but the memory is as vivid as ever. The village still whispers of the curse, and no one dares to seek the treasure again. The forest is silent now, but sometimes, on a quiet night, I can still hear the screams. After the king vanished, the village tried to return to normal. But the fear hung over us like a dark cloud. The market remained empty, the fields untended. The people moved about like shadows, avoiding the forest and speaking only in hushed tones. The once lively village was now a ghost town. My mother, once a vibrant woman, grew pale and thin. She barely spoke, her eyes always darting to the edge of the forest. I tried to be brave for her, but I was just a child. The weight of the curse pressed down on all of us, and I felt its cold grip in my heart every day. I remember one night in particular. The moon was full, casting an eerie light over the village. I heard whispers coming from outside my window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw a group of villagers gathered around the fire. They were talking about the curse, their faces lit by the flickering flames. "We need to do something," one man said, his voice trembling. "We can't go on like this." "What can we do?" another replied. "The forest has claimed the king and the chiefs. It will take us too if we interfere." "But we can't just sit here and wait for it to come for us," a woman argued. "There must be a way to break the curse." An old man, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "The curse was brought by greed. Perhaps if we give back what was taken, the spirits will be appeased." The villagers murmured in agreement, but no one seemed willing to take the first step. The fear was too deep, the memories of what had happened too fresh. Eventually, they dispersed, each returning to their homes with heavy hearts. The next day, I decided to visit the cave myself. I needed to see the place that had brought so much sorrow to our village. I gathered some food and water and set out at dawn. The journey was long and difficult, but I felt a strange sense of determination. As I approached the cave, I felt a chill run down my spine. The entrance was dark and foreboding, the air around it heavy with an unnatural stillness. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The cave was cold and damp, the walls covered in moss. I walked deeper, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Finally, I reached a chamber filled with gold and jewels. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. This was the treasure that had cursed our village. I knelt down and placed my hand on a pile of gold coins. They were cold and heavy, and as I touched them, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I whispered a prayer, asking for forgiveness for the greed that had brought us here. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I turned and saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was the stranger, the storyteller who had brought the tale of the treasure to our village. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and he smiled at me, a chilling smile that sent shivers down my spine. "You should not be here, child," he said, his voice echoing off the cave walls. "Why did you tell us about this place?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I merely told a story," he replied. "It was your king's greed that brought you here." "But why?" I pressed. "Why did you do it?" He stepped closer, his eyes boring into mine. "Greed is a powerful force," he said. "It destroys everything it touches. Your king needed to learn that lesson, and so did your village." I backed away, fear gripping my heart. "What do you want from us?" He smiled again, a smile that was both sad and cruel. "I want nothing. The curse has been fulfilled. The treasure will remain here, untouched, a reminder of the cost of greed. With that, it turned and disappeared into the shadows. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Then I turned and ran, the echoes of his words ringing in my ears. When I returned to the village, I told the elders what had happened. They listened in silence, their faces grim. We all knew what needed to be done. The treasure had to be left where it was, a warning to future generations. We held a ceremony, gathering at the edge of the forest. The elders spoke words of repentance, and we all vowed to live simply, without greed. It was a solemn moment, but there was also a sense of relief. We had faced the curse and survived. Life slowly returned to normal after that. The market filled with people again, and the fields were tended once more. The fear that had gripped our village began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope. We had learned our lesson, and we were determined not to forget it. Years passed, and the story of the cursed treasure became a legend, told to children as a warning. The forest remained a place of mystery and fear, but we respected it and kept our distance. The village thrived, and the memory of the king and his chiefs faded into history. I grew up and moved to the city, seeking a new life away from the shadows of my past. But I never forgot what happened. At night, when the world is quiet, I can still hear the whispers of the forest, reminding me of the cost of greed. The screams of the chiefs and the madness of the king echo in my mind, a haunting reminder of a time when our village faced the darkness and found its way back to the light. Now, as an old man, I tell the story to my grandchildren. I want them to understand the importance of humility and the dangers of greed. The forest may be silent, but its lesson lives on. We must never forget the price we paid for our desires, and we must always strive to live with respect and gratitude for the world around us. The night the forest swallowed the king may be long past, but its shadow will forever linger in our hearts.